There it is. We are live, coming down in 3, 2, 1. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I am Hub Arkush, along with my co-hosts and partners in crime, Sean Hammond, who is, of course, our Chicago Bears insider beat reporter on the beat every day, chasing it down 24/7. And Kyle Nabors rejoins us this week. Kyle had a rough couple of weeks, had to get a booster shot, had Friday night drive and high school football craziness in Illinois, which is one of the best weekends of high school football. Real quick, before we get to everything else, Kyle, I was following you the whole weekend a couple of weeks ago, and it did seem like there was some exceptionally good championship games compared to what we often get in the 6 or 7 or 8 different classes.
Yeah, I mean, it was a mixed bag, like you do expect. Sometimes you get some blowouts. The Cary Grove East St. Louis state championship game in 6A was maybe the best high school football game I've ever seen. A lot of people are saying the same thing. It's definitely ranked up there in terms of best high school football state championship game. I don't know if you know anything, or if you guys know anything about Luther Burden, but he's a senior wide receiver at East St. Louis. He's committed to Mizzou. Pretty much could have gone anywhere in the country. But we're going to be talking about him on Sundays in a few years. The kid is incredible, and it was a lot of fun to watch him on a football field.
You know, it's actually interesting. For I don't know how long it was, I guess about 8, 9 years, I did the TV broadcast, the color commentary on the TV broadcast at NBC Sports Chicago of the Saturday games, the 4 higher classes. And East St. Louis is a legendary, a nationally legendary high school football program. And, you know, people might wonder Missouri, that's because it's tucked down there, you know, East St. Louis, and it's in the southeastern or southwestern part of the state, much closer to Missouri than the Illinois schools, but has produced some incredible football players over the years. And I did 2 or 3 of their title games that were really a lot of fun. And I know, Sean, sometimes it feels like we're on the high school beat still. We're not. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But I know you started there too. And Illinois high school football is pretty special. Just ask Illinois, ask Illinois, Michigan, Ohio State, all the Big Ten programs that focus a lot of their recruiting there.
Yeah, I spent my time out at state football with Kyle over the years here. And Kyle, East St. Louis, they have a pretty good lineman too, don't they?
Yeah, Miles McVeigh.
Where's he going?
I think he's undercited. He has offers from pretty much every SEC school. I mean, he's another one that you're going to see on Sunday. I saw him in 8th grade when they came up and played Batavia, and he already looked like he was about 22 years old. I mean, the kid is 6'5", 290. He looks like an NFL lineman. Their entire offensive line is bigger than a lot of Division I colleges. It's incredible to behold at the high school level.
You know, you guys want to, or not you guys, but any of our listeners and folks that are with us want to get an idea of how good Illinois high school football is these days. Watch me. Yeah, I'm a Michigan alum and I'm biased, but this has nothing to do with that. Watch the Michigan-Georgia game, because the presence and the future of that program is going to be under center at times. And J.J. McCarthy, who went, where was it, Nazareth?
Yeah, he went to Nazareth and then actually went to IMG Academy his senior year.
Yeah, and then you've got A.J. Henning, who went to Lincoln Way East, and you know, these are 2 of the most explosive players in the country, and they're young.
Trevor Keegan, I believe they're starting
77.
They're starting left guard is actually a Crystal Lake South alum.
Yeah, so it's I mean, Illinois high school football is about as good as it gets. We hear so much about Florida and California and Texas because you do tend to get more of the skill position players out there. But if you want to talk about the big offensive lineman, the occasional quarterback, wide receiver, a lot of linebackers and defensive players, really great coming out of the state too. And maybe the Chicago Bears will start paying more attention to it, because it looks at this point like we're focused on the future. One of the things I do want to talk about a little bit today, guys, it's going to be a little bit of my focus the next couple of weeks in coverage, is that I don't think that we're looking at a rebuild of the Chicago Bears. And I think you can justify that in a lot of different ways. There's definitely some talent here, but it's pretty clear we're looking at a reboot. I don't think anybody is kidding themselves. Yeah, they're mathematically alive for the playoffs like everybody else is right now. And as a matter of fact, if they won out at 9 and 8, they'd probably be even a 5th or a 6th seed, not a 7th. But that's not going to happen, you know. And the fact is, this is an organization with a lot of issues, Sean. It has been interesting and frustrating and at times confusing being up at Hallis Hall the last couple of weeks as to exactly where they're at. But what we do know is it's Packers week, and it does look actually, Sean, like they're getting healthier. This may be the closest to we're never going to see the team that we thought we see at the start of the season, but this may be as close as they've been to having all their arrows in the quiver, so to speak, when they had the Lambeau Sunday.
Yeah, it's been surprisingly good news this week on the injury report. I know David Montgomery was there on Wednesday, but he returned to practice, and we got Akeem Hicks coming back in a limited capacity, and Allen Robinson also coming back to practice. Damian Williams. So yeah, the Bears are getting healthy just in time for this Packers game. And if I recall, I think Akeem Hicks said something to the effect last time they played the Packers that he never wants to miss this game. We all remember him pulling up after he sacked Aaron Rodgers with that groin issue, and that was it. He was done for the day. I would expect he might be gearing up to go here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, Kyle, because Akeem Hicks is one of my favorite Chicago Bears. He's been a great presence in that locker room. He's been a real veteran leader. I would love to see him back next year. It seems unlikely with all that's gone down this year. Of course, we don't even know who, the coach, the GM, we don't know what's going on. But what we do know is that, unfortunately, one of the reasons he couldn't get the contract extension he wanted is he's been injured the last 3 years for the most part. And it does seem like every time he comes back from a serious injury, it's against the Green Bay Packers. Sean is spot on about that.
Yeah, it's been unfortunate for Akeem. He's been effective when on the field. He just can't stay on the field. And really, that's the, we talk about not being a total rebuild. You look on the offensive side of the ball, obviously at quarterback, David Montgomery, Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet. You got a young offensive line that you feel pretty good about. There's a lot of young emerging talent on the offensive side. The question, after the coaching change and after we figure out what's happening in the front office, is going to be, what do you do with the defense? The Bears are going to need some resources in terms of finances. I saw someone from, I believe, Ian Rappaport with the first report the other day. Another followed him up talking about the salary cap. Looks like it's going to go up to about 208. I think it was $208 million, which would put the Bears around the $40 million mark. But there's some big pieces that they need to try and get re-signed. So there can probably be some changes on that defensive side of the football.
Ooh, Kyle slipped it on us there, Sean. He's got Matt Nagy as dead man walking. I don't think anybody doubts at this point that a coaching change is extremely likely. I'm sure we'll get into whether it's justified or not. But yeah, I mean, this is what I say that you look at the defense, guys. I mean, and if you re-sign Bilal Nichols, which I'm sure they will make an attempt to do. You look at Kyrus Tonga, who's been impressive this year, and then you go to Roquan Smith in the middle. Travis Gibson has flashed a little bit. Eddie Jackson has played better football when healthy this year. Jalen Johnson. You've got some young pieces there. The question is the 30-somethings. Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn are going to be back. Robert Quinn may be having the best year of his career, and Khalil Mack was on pace for a career season. So I don't know that you can count on them as much as you'd like to, but I think that even on both sides of the ball, you can make the argument that there could be a quick turnaround here, depending on what they do. And with that, I know we have a lot of questions we want to get to, Kyle. The one point I do want to make, and I haven't really glanced at all the questions yet, is you mentioned Justin Fields. He's the franchise. He's the future. I'm excited about it as an analyst, as a guy who's covered this for a long time. This is as bright a young quarterback prospect as we've seen anywhere in the league in a little while. So that is exciting. But I am concerned about one thing. Sean, most of the questions up at Hallis Hall this week has been about the various ways that they're going to have to and need to protect Justin Fields this week back on the field because of those broken ribs. My question is, as much as this kid means to the future of the franchise, if you have to protect him, should he be on the field at all?
Yeah, it's a fair question. And we heard Justin Fields saying when he met with us on Wednesday that, yeah, there's still going to be some pain there. Matt Nagy kept using the term that he's been cleared medically, but then Justin comes in the room after Nagy and is saying, there's a little bit of pain there still. It's just managing it, fighting through it, blah, blah, blah. And you wonder, okay, well, is he really healthy or isn't he? Because, just doing a quick Google search, rib injuries don't heal all that quickly. He's probably still dealing with some side effects, and we don't know how healed his ribs are. And yes, you want to see him on the field. I don't know what Andy Dalton's hand injury, I don't know how that plays into it. If Dalton's just not going to be available this week. and they feel like they need Justin, but obviously they want Justin out there, at whenever they can get him out there. So it's important to get him to play, but yeah, you want him to be healthy.
I can't imagine.
Kyle, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, when this injury first occurred, I decided to go for some expertise. And so I went and checked at the Mayo Clinic. I went and checked at Sloan Kettering at some of these general information websites. And the one thing they are all consistent on is at least 6 weeks to fully heal broken ribs. I asked the question of Matt, I think it was last week, not this past week, but the week before, leading up to the Cardinals game, just to clarify, because we'd heard the expression bruised, we'd heard cracked, and we'd heard broken, and Matt clarified. He said, yes, they were broken ribs. And so I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm sure they have Justin Fields' best interest at heart. I'm sure they don't want to put him in tremendous harm's way. But you get into some of this cloudy football thinking where winning is everything, and particularly with this team, I just wonder if this wasn't the Packers, if they'd be bringing him back a week later.
Oh, I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, I can't imagine they would be dumb enough to put him out there unless their doctors felt confident that he's safe enough to go. Now, I can't imagine having cracked ribs and having a 280-pound man come charging at me at full speed. That should be interesting. But I do want to I'm going to throw this question from Hairless Yoda up there because I think this is a good place to start and kind of, what should we expect from the Bears the rest of the season? Besides the Packers, the rest of the schedule doesn't seem too daunting. So could we imagine a world where the Bears go 7-10? Excuse me. I don't know. I can't predict anything with this team. I don't know about you guys. To me, it comes down to, you just want to see progress from Justin Fields. And we talk about protecting Justin Fields. We look back to that Baltimore game, right? We were excited coming off the second half against Pittsburgh. I think it was the Pittsburgh game. He had a big second half. And then it went back to kind of holding the ball too long in that first half against Baltimore. And I guess my thought is with the cracked ribs, maybe that speeds up his internal clock, not wanting to get hit. And maybe that helps a little bit in terms of keeping him on time.
It's a great point, a fair point, Kyle. But once he's out there on the field, anybody who's played the game at any level or any sport for that matter knows that the adrenaline does tend to kick in, and that while you're still you can feel the pain and you're aware of it, it's not your first focus. Because if that's his first focus, then they shouldn't be out there, and they need to get him out of there fast. And so, my guess is that he'll play the game the way he normally plays the game. And unfortunately, that has been as an inexperienced rookie who isn't ready yet and doesn't have the timing and the speed of the game completely down yet. If there is any impact from the ribs, what I would expect, Yoda, and Sean, I'll throw it to you. I love that I've reached the point in my life where I just call him Yoda without even thinking about it, because it's a great handle. And I'm not big on Twitter handles, but Hairless Yoda is one of my favorites. I would think that he might be a little less likely to be running around with the football. I think that's where he's exposed more. I don't think you're as worried standing in the pocket about taking a hit as exposing yourself in the open field. So I don't know that he'd get rid of the ball quicker, but I do think you're going to see him being a little more careful when he takes off running with it.
I think he's going to be a bit more careful in that area of his game, Hub. I think you're right. Whether we see him running out of bounds in certain situations or sliding a little bit more quickly than maybe he would normally. We've seen him, be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for with his slides. He's sometimes a little bit delayed, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
There's been more than one occasion where I've said to myself, "Get down, kid."
Yeah, I think reluctant is a better word.
Yeah,
reluctant.
He's out there fighting. But Kyle, Sean, you're right.
And I will say this too, just in talking to Justin this week, this is definitely, from what he says, not nearly as bad as his rib injury last year in the college football playoff. He said that took him 4 to 5 weeks after the season. He wasn't doing anything. That also, I guess, apparently involved some sort of hip injury. And that, anybody watching that game saw the hit that he took. That was a major hit. Whereas this time, he doesn't really even know when this injury happened. He could not pinpoint a play. And, on the positive side, it sounds like he has been able to overcome this one a little bit more quickly.
Kyle, we're going to get back to the questions, guys, and we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so with nothing but your questions. We've got a lot of good ones. We really appreciate you joining us. For anybody listening to our podcast who hasn't been aware to this point, we actually podcast live on StreamYard, which you can join by going to any one of our Twitter accounts at Kyle Nabors, at Sean_Hammond, at Hub_Arkush, or you can just go to YouTube. And get into this when we do it every Friday morning at 9:30, because we love hearing from you guys and it informs us as to what you really want to talk about. Certainly, if you don't want to participate, you can just watch, or you can download it anytime. And if you want to make sure you never miss it, get a subscription to the podcast, go to the App Store on your phone, go to iTunes, go to shawlocal.com. But every Friday morning at 9:30 Chicago time is when we put this podcast together. And I want to just make this quick point before we get to our next question. When I asked, should he be out there? And Kyle, you had the perfect response. I'm not suggesting that the Bears are ignoring the doctors, that they're doing something inappropriate here, that they're doing something unacceptable. But team doctors are interesting too, because they treat players in a way different than they treat their normal patients going through day-to-day life. Their job is to keep them safe, but to also understand the boundaries of what's safe while trying to participate and do your work. And so I'm not suggesting in any way that Matt Nagy or Ryan Pace or George McCaskey, whoever's making this decision, is putting him out there against the doctor's suggestions, because that would be a whole different thing. It's just this football mentality, this tough guy mentality, and sometimes you worry about protecting these players from themselves. And we know that Justin Fields has got that kind of approach, and he will need to be protected from himself at times. And so I'm just hoping that this isn't one of those issues where he's being less forthright with the doctors than he should be, and where everybody isn't watching him closely enough to make sure. Realistically, guys play with bad ribs all the time. They put the flak jackets on, they go out and do it. So I question as to whether this is a good idea or not. But I don't want anybody to think that I'm suggesting the Bears are doing something that they shouldn't, at risk to the young man.
I think we're all going to cringe the first time we see it. If I remember right, the play Justin Fields went out on was him breaking up the middle of the field and kind of getting stretched out as he was lunging for a first down, if I remember right, against the Ravens.
Yeah,
he's not sure if that's the play he injured himself on, but like that's the type of thing that you're going to be concerned about on Sunday night.
He came up short on a third down attempt, went to the sidelines, and then we saw, not even much time. I don't even remember if he went to the blue tent. He went to the locker room pretty quick. But he did say afterwards, Kyle, that it was already bothering him at that point. And so that was when they knew he couldn't continue, but they still haven't pinpointed looking at the tape when he took the shot. Yeah.
That's the type of play, though, when you see it, you're going to cringe on Sunday night, because you're going to worry about him re-aggravating that injury on something like that.
Who we got next in queue here, Kyle?
All right, let's go with Justin here as we start to get into some big picture talk, which after watching that game last Sunday, it's probably good to start talking big picture and less about what actually happens on the field.
Justin Young, good enough to join us this morning. Thank you, Justin. If, quote, progress, close quote, is the basis for determining this regime's future, can a case be made that Pace has improved in his role as GM? And then based on the offense and record, I don't believe one can be made for Nagy. Well, guys, let me grab the Matt part first. I agree, Justin. There's no way you can call this progress, but you do have to deal with the issue of how much, if at all, has Matt Nagy's ability to make progress been impacted by decisions that were made organizationally as opposed to on his own. I reported exclusively here at Shaw, not only shawlocal.com, but in all our great newspapers and, of course, our partners at the Daily Herald, that the decision to make Justin Fields the full-time starter that came between week 4 after the Lions game prior to the Raiders game week 5, that direction came from up top. Now Matt has since publicly disputed my report, but not in the way that these things often get disputed. And I can tell you the reporting was solid. And so at that point, you've got a 3-2 football team. If he had been allowed to stay with his plan, what would have happened? Would they be in the mess that they're in right now? People want to look at the Andy Dalton game last week and say, oh, you're a jerk, Hub. Look what would have happened. That's one game out of 146 NFL starts. We don't know what would have happened. But that said, I think there's enough other issues with the job that Matt has done as the head coach that you can argue he was unlikely to make enough progress. Ryan Pace, on the other hand, guys, and I've made this point repeatedly over the last year and a half or two, when you sit down and actually analyze the talent he's acquired, when you realize the fact that everybody is so upset with Matt Nagy because they must think he has enough talent to win more games with, I think, Justin, it's a lot harder, to say that Ryan Pace has failed. Now, people say, well, will he get a third coaching hire? John Fox was not his hire. He was the GM. He had veto power. He was the youngest GM in the league. He got lobbied into that hire by ownership and by Ernie Accorsi, who's a friend of mine, who's now retired, but a former Super Bowl GM, who was the Bears consultant at the time. His first true hire was Matt Nagy. Now, it's looking like that hire may fail, but a lot of GMs get a second crack. They rarely get a third crack. So Sean, that's what kind of leaves Ryan in this gray area of exactly. I know a lot of fans have made up their mind, but in terms of how, forget the McCaskies, how any NFL organization might view his performance.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say Ryan Pace certainly has improved at his job. When you, like you said, Hub, when you go back and remember how this started, he was the youngest GM. They basically told him, this is going to be your coach for the, at least at the beginning, and good luck. He didn't have the football operations guy overseeing him. He didn't have, who does he go to learn how to do this job? He probably leaned on his experience from New Orleans, but I would imagine he's much better at just the ins and outs of this now than he was when he began. And, whether you're looking at the guys he's drafted or not, I mean, you take over any job as a young, inexperienced guy, you're going to be a lot better 6-7 years down the road than when you begin. But I think it's fair to criticize, some of the decisions that he's made, and certainly he's made mistakes. We've seen, him draft or trade up to draft Mitch Trubisky and other moves like that. You can pick apart any GM's draft process, though, and I think I'm not arguing that they should keep him. I'm just saying that I can see, if you try to get in their minds a little bit as leaders of an organization, of a business, why they might think that he has improved at his job.
Kyle, here's what's interesting about this is that the dialogue, the public narrative has gotten so out of whack and out of perspective because of all the, quote, experts, close quote, who don't have a clue what they're talking about, and all the angry fans. The reality is that when Ryan Pace hired Matt Nagy, in the he had been hired to do a complete rebuild. And in the 3 seasons before, during that rebuild, they had gone 14-34 under John Fox. Matt Nagy, if he is fired, is going to have a winning record, worst case 500, even if he loses the rest of the way out. And I really don't think that's going to happen. He will have been to the playoffs twice in the last 4 years. He and Ryan will have each won a coach and an executive of the year award. That's progress. Now, is it enough? I'm not saying it is. Is Ryan the best guy to be the top football guy in the Bears organization? I'm not saying that either, but I do think that the evaluation just isn't done fairly most often in the public narrative. And the fact is that the team has made progress under him in the last 4 years.
I mean, this hasn't been a complete dumpster fire like some people want to try and claim it is with Ryan Pace. This is not a Ryan Grigson situation back when he was at Indy, where you got to burn things to the ground.
Be careful. Hey, man, Ryan's a friend. The other Ryan's a friend of mine too. You're right. Things didn't go well.
The thing is, I'm saying that went really poorly. I'm saying it's not that situation, which makes it murkier. I mean, if you're asking my opinion here, I do not believe that the Bears as an organization have made enough progress under Ryan Pace in 7 years to warrant him remaining as the general manager of this team. I believe that he has not gotten enough out of his top draft capital. He's used a lot of that top draft capital to make up for mistakes that he's made. And he's been far too inconsistent via free agency to warrant, continuing in the job.
It's Ryan Grigson, who, by the way, is a Chicago guy who I've known since he finished at Purdue. And his best friend is the father of Cole Kmet, Frank Kmet, who was a Bear at one time. But it's an interesting analogy there, Kyle, because Ryan, his career path, I think it was 6 years in Indy. followed an opposite arc to Ryan Pace's, in that he took over and did really well immediately with Tony Dungy and Peyton Manning. And then, once they moved on and then Peyton Manning left via free agency, that's when everything started to go south. And that's when he and Chuck Pagano ended up on completely opposite pages. So he had a lot of success early, and then things came apart. Whereas Ryan, took time. They were awful for a few years, and then they began to have some success, and they got to a level, and then they never moved to the next level. So really kind of two different ways that this can go for young GMs, which they both were at the time they got the jobs.
I think the biggest indictment, of course, we want to take a swing all the time at the Mitch Trubisky draft pick. And listen, he should wear that. I mean, when you're a general manager, you trade, not only do you trade up, but you're taking a quarterback in the top 10. When you get it wrong, you have to wear that. The bigger issue to me, though, is you look back at really their salary cap issues the last few years. And part of that's pandemic induced, but he has not managed the cap particularly well either. And that comes, we went into this year and we talked about, even when you combine the contracts of Nick Foles and Andy Dalton, it still was essentially league average at quarterback, and you were still in really bad straits financially, cap wise. They've kicked the can down the road on some major contracts, and now it leaves you in the situation where you're going to make some tough choices this offseason to ensure that you're able to re-sign a guy like Roquan Smith. James Daniels is a free agent, right?
Yeah, James Daniels, Roquan Smith, and Bilal Nichols.
Yeah, I mean, you put that money.
No, Roquan will be back for his fifth year.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
fifth year.
He has a fifth-year option.
Yeah, because he was a first-round pick. So yeah, he'll be here definitely this year. They want to extend him,
but you want that extension, which is going to eat up cap room.
Yeah, but Kyle, I think we're doing a little bit of revisionist history here, and this is what frustrates me. The reality is they never had any cap issues until COVID. And if it had not been for the radical reduction in the cap, they wouldn't have had them then either. They never were in a situation until last year with the COVID-induced cap where they had to release Kyle Fuller, where they couldn't make a signing or make a move they needed to. So I think when people hammer him for the cap, that's unfair. Now, Mitch, you can hammer him for all you want. And I have a prediction to make about that. Even that one, I think Mitch Trubisky is going to be the next Ryan Tannehill. I don't think he's as bad a quarterback. And we'll see what happens. Now,
I like the bold prediction.
Yeah, and I will still never excuse the trade. The trade was inexcusable. He wasted valuable day 2 picks to make a move he didn't have to make, and he will always have to wear that Mitch didn't turn out to be Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes. Now, in the Deshaun Watson case, that may even prove to be a good thing. We'll see how that one plays out. But this is where I get frustrated with the Ryan Pace conversation, because the cap stuff, I just don't think that's reality, and they did end up in a bad situation. Like a bunch of look where the New Orleans Saints are at right now. I mean, is anybody criticizing Mickey Loomis? I mean, that team has completely come apart because they did abuse the cap. And then when the COVID stuff hit on top of it, they're probably looking at a rebuild. It's a slightly different situation. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I'll pile on Mickey Loomis for giving Taysom Hill that type of money, but
I think that's stupid. I agree with you. But my point is, these are guys who abuse the cap. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just the cap stuff always gets me a little crazy.
Let's Rick Gonzalez, a regular, has a question in there. But Rick, before we get to that, because that's kind of talking about coaching, he's asking about Vic Fangio. We'll get into coaching potential after that, but there's another question about roster construction from Michael Jones. Here, I'll throw it up here for you, Hub.
How come the Bears have a problem drafting, developing, and keeping wide receivers? I can't name 3 wide receivers we drafted since 1980 that made it past their first contract and were actually productive. Can you? Well, 3 you want? I mean, Curtis Conway and Marty Booker immediately come to mind.
Rick Gonzalez actually and then Dennis McKinnon actually. I'll throw Rick had a response in the chat about that. I think Dennis McKinnon. No,
they didn't draft him. He was an undrafted rookie free agent. To your point, I have an answer for you, because I don't think they have valued the position enough. If you recall, Curtis Conway was a first-round pick. Marty, I want to say, was a third-round pick. How many first or second round picks have they used on wide receivers? I mean, Anthony Miller comes to mind, and Anthony Miller, Alshon Jeffrey, who became a very good football player. And Alshon Jeffrey was here on his second contract before they let him go. Bernard Berrien was maybe a second or a third. I don't know.
Third, I want to say.
But a lot of it is just in how you value positions. It's the same objection I've had to the way they've handled the offensive tackle position. They under Mark Hatley and Jerry Angelo, they valued it. They just picked the wrong guys. In Chris Williams and there was another failed offensive tackle besides Chris Williams earlier in the Angelo regime.
Mark Colombo.
Well, Mark was, that's the guy, but Mark was an injury. That's in fairness to them. Mark went on to have after they thought his career was over, he went on to have a pretty good career in Dallas. Yeah. So, but to me, Sean, it's as simple as that. They haven't picked the right guys. That's always the answer when it comes to drafting in some cases, but they haven't used enough draft capital to try and get those guys. The wide receiver position became the focal point diva position, really in the aughts, towards 08, 09, and then the early teens when everybody started looking for one. And if you go into that window, the Bears just weren't, they signed Brandon Marshall as a free agent. And if he hadn't been one of the worst head cases in the history of the league, it would have been a good signing.
They actually traded for him, didn't they?
You're right. They did trade for him. You're absolutely correct. They traded with Miami. But I just, I think it's a combination of not identifying the right guys, but also not using high enough picks on them.
Yeah, and if you're going back to 1980, certainly the game was different then, and the priority was certainly different in the way that it was played. But looking at the more recent drafts, I think you're exactly right, Hub. And it's so hard to receiver is almost one of those positions where Kyle, I think you were saying this last year during the draft, that you almost got to take one or two guys every year because you really don't know who's going to pan out. And, we've seen it with the Kevin White pick, with the time that was the most recent time when they did draft high on the receiver and that didn't work out for them. It's really kind of a crapshoot, I feel like.
Yeah, they've not spent a lot of draft capital at the wide receiver position over the last, 15 years, really? I mean, you go back after the Super Bowl team was Muhsin Muhammad and Bernard Berrien, if I remember right. Yep. And then after that, you went into a window where you had Devin Hester and Johnny Knox and some other guys, and people kept saying, you got to go out and get someone. Then they ended up, making the trade for Brandon Marshall. They drafted Alshon. And then they kind of just went back to those guys moved on. But, the question was about into a second contract. There's also not a lot of wide receivers that do earn that second contract with teams. I mean, they're either elite and you're locking them up long term, or you get into this kind of gray area where they're asking for a lot of money, which happened with Kenny Galladay, for instance, up in Detroit, and he ended up moving on despite being a pretty good wide receiver.
Guys, DeAndre Hopkins got traded. No, he signed the second deal, but then Houston wasn't willing to pay it, and so they traded him. Look at what's gone on with Michael Thomas down in New Orleans. I mean, these are guys that have set historic records in recent years. And the other thing you got to remember is that the two positions that the teams have historically been shy about drafting in the top 10, top 15 are wide receiver and cornerback, because so many more failed than succeeded over the 90s and again the aughts and the teens, and it's really just in this modern day age of wide receivers and tight end bodies who are matchup nightmares and can't be covered that they've had more success drafting these kids in the top 10, top 15. But it has been a notoriously difficult position to draft at for years, and then you look at wide receiver and running back. You get as much talent out of day 2 and even day 3 picks these days, as particularly at running back, as you get in the first round. And so they're just more difficult. Well, why actually running backs become fairly easy to draft at. I mean, everybody's got a great young running back now, no matter what round you get them in, because there's so many of them. But wide receivers a lot trickier.
Yeah, and just look at Darnell Mooney as an example. I mean, sure, the Bears liked him coming out, but you don't know that he's going to be your number one receiver in 2 years. I mean, that's almost impossible to predict. And, there is value in taking those guys on day 3 because you just never know. I really feel like you just got to take a chance on a guy every year and hope it works out.
Yeah. And I want to go ahead, Kyle.
I think it feels worse, the question right now, because the wide receivers taken in the first round this year, I'm thinking Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, who was the other one?
Devontae Smith.
Devontae Smith has looked pretty good. Elijah Moore was taken. Did he end up getting into the first round?
I want to say high second.
High second.
There was one more late. There was one more late in the first round. I can't remember.
So the early wide receiver crop this year has performed really well as rookies.
Darius Toney.
Yeah, Kadarius Tony's been banged up
Rashad
quite a
Bateman
bit.
was 27.
Yeah, I mean, so the wide receiver group has performed really well in the first round this year, but it's usually more of a crapshoot. You go back. I'm thinking of Denzel Mims, a guy that I really liked, I believe, last year coming out of the draft, has really underperformed with the Jets. The Bears need to make more of an investment in second and third round picks at the wide receiver position. I wouldn't be highly advocating for them though to be taking a wide receiver in the first round. Or I guess it depends, where they land. Like if you're picking like in the 20s, I think that's good. I'm really hesitant when you start getting into the top 10 to take a wide receiver unless you got to be really, really confident they're going to be Jamar Chase.
Well, yeah, and I don't know anybody who didn't think that Jamar Chase was going to be great. This great, I'm not sure anybody knew, although I kept saying I don't understand why he wouldn't be the first one off the board, and he wasn't. But Jalen Waddles has turned out to be a pretty good football player too. Kadarius Toney, you're right, he's been banged up, but he hasn't been what we thought he would be. Rashad Bateman was drafted to be a slot monster, hitting one home run after another. He's averaging under 9 yards a catch, and so you do want to be careful what you spend that high capital on.
All right, let's see. It's a question just came in here. Rick, I promise I'm not ignoring you. I just want to keep the coaching stuff. I think that's a good place to wrap up while we talk about roster construction. Brent Morgan just sent this in, though, Hub.
How do you feel Tonga has been progressing? Can he be a long-term replacement for Hicks? It's interesting, Sean, because we just talked to Sean Desai about this yesterday. It happened rather quietly, but in last Sunday's game against the Cardinals, Eddie Goldman, coming off maybe the best game of his career in Pittsburgh, only got 14 snaps against the Cardinals, while Tonga got 27, I think it was. And Desai's answer initially, which I believe that Sean's a pretty straight shooter, he wasn't even aware of that snap count until the question was asked. But the reason is you get in the flow of the game, and there are certain packages, particularly when you're in sub packages, as much as they were against Kyler Murray, where there's different guys, that have been working at it in practice. They're very happy with Eddie Goldman, but the fact that Tonga has become that significant a part of the regular rotation tells you everything you need to know. He is an excellent two-gap stuffer. What makes Goldman and Hicks special is that they can create pass rush pressure up the middle too. Tonga has yet to show much of that, but for a 7th-round draft pick, Sean, I think he's done an outstanding job. And this is the dilemma with Ryan Pace. He's one of the best day 3 drafters we've ever seen. He keeps finding these guys, but these guys don't become the franchise players that you're looking for. So I think the answer is Tonga definitely has a future with the Bears. And what's exciting is he's doing this as a rookie. We'll see how much he progresses. And so, yeah, he is looking like an excellent pick. But again, Akeem Hicks is a rarity because he's not a nose tackle. I mean, he's an inside anchor tackle. He can play on the nose, but he's a guy who can play anywhere along the defensive line and be disruptive. Whereas Eddie Goldman and Kairos Tonga are pretty much, nose tackles in a 30 front.
Yeah, I'd be hesitant to compare him to Akeem Hicks, at least at this point, because of what you're saying, Hub. And Hicks is such a unique guy in the way he plays the game. But I agree that Kairos Tonga has showed some promise, and I'd like to, it sounds like Akeem's going to be back, which will eat into the snaps a little bit all across that defensive line. But I'd like to see Tonga, continue to get some opportunities these final 5 games. You might as well play some of your young guys here. With the playoffs not looking like an option.
Go ahead, Kyle.
No, so I'm just trying to figure out here, looking at over the cap, we're talking about potential changes, right? I mean, you guys feel pretty good about with the way Robert Quinn has performed that him and Khalil Mack will be back on this roster next year, right?
Well, they'll be back because they still have dead cap money to eat, if nothing else. I mean,
no, they actually. I mean, you would get savings, I believe, according to over the cap.
I don't know. It wouldn't be much if you did.
It's not for if Khalil Mack's not a lot, but like.
I think Robert Quinn, you could. I haven't looked at it in a while, but
yeah, Robert. I think
he's certainly earned the chance to come back, though.
Robert Quinn's got a chance to be a first-team All-Pro right now.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I think you base your defense. If we're talking about trying not to go into a rebuild, you base your defense around those edge rushers. Those guys are back, but you start talking about Tonga, so you start looking for savings. It's probably going to come along the defensive line. Akeem Hicks isn't. He's out of contract. You may not be back with the injury issues. Goldman, maybe. I mean, Goldman offers you a little under $7 million in savings. Angelo Blackson, a guy that probably has not performed up to the contract that he was given. Jeremiah Atachu. Then you look at the linebacker position, Danny Trevathan, if he was post June 1st.
But Kyle, not sure what we're doing here, because the last I looked, without any more releases, the Bears are projected to have the 5th most cap space in the league, and that was before this report about it going up to $208 million, which, by the way, is strictly a guess. Nobody has any idea what it's going to be. This is why, again, I say, people who question Pace's cap management, it's already fixed. Just with the guys who are going to be out of contract this year in Hicks and Robinson, even if the cap didn't go up, they'd have about $30 million in cap space. Now, you want to create more? Yeah, you can.
Well, you're gonna need to create more. I mean, at 44 right now, they're at $44 million. I mean, if you're re-signing Roquan Smith, you're bringing back who am I thinking? I'm sorry. James Daniels.
But those contracts aren't. Because even with Roquan, who should get a monster deal, on the front end of those deals, those are structured in such a way that they don't really hurt the cap. And then what you're planning on is by the time the pain from those contracts kicks in, Mack and Quinn almost certainly are going to be done. So, I think the key number is that right now, by doing nothing, it looks like they've got somewhere between 30 and 40 million in cap space. And now if you're going to try and, re-sign Allen Robinson or Akeem Hicks, it gets more interesting. But I think we all agree that they're probably not going to do that. And even if they did, those deals would be structured in such a way. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't think creating cap space is really an issue, because the other piece of it is that regardless of whether it's a rebuild or a reboot, I don't think they're looking to do this via free agency. They've got the draft capital that they have. They might try and sign 1 or 2 targeted free agents, but I don't see cap space as being an issue this coming season. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I mean, if you're keeping Ryan Pace around, you have to assume he's going to be aggressive, right? How long can how long can you tread water, though?
Well, I mean, if you're keeping him around, it's because you believe in the young talent he's built. And again, you're saying that this team should have been. And hey guys, the key to this whole thing: if Justin Fields doesn't take a big step forward next year, then we're having a whole different conversation. And so, the assumption is that you keep Ryan, because mainly Justin Fields, but a number of his other kids are going to become much better football players. And guys like Quinn and Mack and Jackson still have all pro ability. If you're wrong, if you're wrong about that, then don't keep Ryan Pace.
And here's the thing too, Hub, you've mentioned, you don't think they're going to do a full rebuild, at least not in the near future. And it comes down to the fact that you got Justin Fields on his rookie contract. They need to take advantage of that before
4 more years. Yeah. 4 years.
Mm-hmm. He's got a couple more years on that. And, that's your window. You want to ideally be competing for playoff spots while he's still on that rookie deal, because it's much more affordable. If he does, have a breakout season, or several breakout seasons, if he does make the progress that we're expecting, he's going to be making a lot more money than he is right now.
Let me turn this around, Kyle. We're unfortunately running out of time. We'll try and get 1 or 2 more questions in, but I mean, if you're going, when you say be aggressive, what positions are you thinking about targeting in free agency?
Oh, okay. I got to think about that for a second here.
Let's throw up another question. Yeah, throw up another question. We'll come back.
Obviously, wide receiver. You're going to need help. I mean, you need help along the defensive line. Let's see here. I mean, how do you guys feel at cornerback at this point?
Hey, you wide receiver is, to me, clearly the number 1 need, and cornerback is the number 2 need. The defensive line, I'm not as concerned about. I mean, they haven't dominated without Akeem Hicks, but they haven't been awful, and they're a 4-8 football team. They got to get better everywhere. Nobody's pretending, that they don't need more talent, but I just don't see, high-priced free agents necessarily being the answer.
All right. Well, we're talking about Justin's rookie contract. So now this is a good time to bring in Rick's question about Vic Fangio.
If Vic Fangio is let go by Denver, can you see the Bears hiring Vic as their head coach? No, Rick. I mean, first of all, I don't think Vic Fangio is going to be let go. I'm not hearing, the Broncos are in the thick of an AFC playoff race. I don't know that Vic has done the best job in the world, but he's doing a good job. But as much as I love Vic Fangio, and if he's not going to be a head coach, he's going to be a defensive coordinator again. I want him to be mine. But I don't think he's done anything to suggest that he's that much better of an answer than Matt was. I don't know. Am I being unfair?
No,
I don't think you're being unfair. No,
I don't think you're being unfair. No, you're good. I mean, Vic is one of my favorite people that I've ever met in the NFL. Just a wonderful person who actually answers questions, so I immediately love him. But that being said, even if he was available, I don't see the Bears going a defensive route. You know, you talk about winning or having this window with Justin Fields on his rookie contract. You're going to want to do everything you can to maximize that, right?
Well, yeah, but that means you got to hire a great offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. I had this debate on the radio at 670 The Score the other day with Danny Parkins, who wanted to hire Joe Brady, and I was like, "What are you, nuts?" You know, I mean, and this whole idea that because you have Justin Fields, the head coach has to be an offensive guy. That is how teams consistently fail at hiring head coaches. The head coach has to be the best top executive in the NFL on the football side. He has to be a guy capable of overseeing both a championship offense and championship defense, or you're not going to win championships. And so offensive coaching is huge. But, Kyle, I think that this is another thing that we get caught up in, that the head coach doesn't necessarily have to be an offensive guy. He's got to be the best. That's where they failed with Matt Nagy. That's where Matt Nagy failed. I think Matt Nagy's going to get another chance someday if he goes back and rehabilitates himself, because I think Matt Nagy has a lot of really good qualities as a head coach. But he never chose to be a head coach. He came here, he was going to be the offensive guru, and as recently as when was it, Sean, that he finally gave the play calling back to Bill Lazor this year? I think it was week 6 or week 7.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 3.5 years in, he was still resisting being a head coach. And at the end of the day, if he is let go, that's going to be his epitaph.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I wouldn't expect the Bears to bring back Fangio as a head coach. I could see them, sure, the Bears like their guys, much as we've seen with Ryan Pace, but I would have a hard time seeing that. Certainly, you would want him back as your defensive coordinator, though.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, Rick, I don't mean to be flip about it. But seriously, I don't, my job is still the whole NFL, not just the Bears. I'm not hearing that Vic is under any real pressure there. I mean, they started 3-0, they dropped 3 or 4 in a row, but they've now, they've gotten back into the playoff race. And, you talk about an offense that is missing parts. It's certainly his. And so I think Vic's going to get at least one more year in Denver unless things really come apart the last few weeks.
Sean and I actually were talking about Rick's question because we saw it in the chat before we jumped on too. And I thought Sean brought up a good point about, they went the young route in Matt Nagy, the young offensive mind. And we saw, the first time coach pretty much fail to be able to delegate properly to focus on his job as a head coach. And that's, it's kind of the $1 million question when you go out to make these this next hire, right, Sean? Because you start looking like, we're bringing the puppy in. We've reached that point of the show. We're bringing the puppy in to comfort us. But you look at someone like Byron Leftwich or Kellen Moore down in Dallas, two guys that are going to get they're going to get interviews this offseason. They're going to be big names, but is that going to be a similar concern if you bring in a young guy? Are they going to want to do their offense their way and not be able to delegate?
Well, yeah, and the fact too is that at least it seems as if when a team makes a coaching hire that doesn't work out, they almost invariably do the 180 and do the opposite, whether it's hiring an offensive guy, next time they go get a defensive guy. I wonder that too, first time head coach and Matt Nagy, offensive guy, do they want somebody with a little, you mentioned Kyle Moore, Kellen Moore, Kyle. Wow, that one threw me for a loop. I don't see them hiring somebody that young because I just think they want somebody with a little bit more experience.
Yeah, we're actually just bringing the puppy in so she doesn't rip out my headset like she did last week. And so she doesn't get in trouble with the big dog because her and Molly are still getting to know each other. But really because we're running out of time here, guys. Sean and I, as we do every Friday, are going to have to get on the road to get out to Hallis Hall and hear who is going and who isn't going against the Packers. And so I wish we could have gotten to more questions, guys, but we have so much fun with you all that time gets away from us when we try and put these podcasts together. So before we sign off, we can't ignore the fact that it's Bear Packer week. It's the oldest. It's not the oldest, actually. There's debate about that. Here goes the headset again. All right, come on, Leslie. You didn't have to stop. Call it what you want. I think it's the best rivalry in sports on the rare occasions when both teams are good. That is certainly not the case now. But interesting stuff in Green Bay, guys. I mean, if you're watching the injury report, Aaron Rodgers has not practiced all week. David Bakhtiari, they keep talking about getting back, still hasn't practiced all week. I'm not even seeing Zadarius Smith and Jair Alexander. And Randall Cobb is still banged up with them. So if the Bears, are as healthy as they've been and the Packers aren't, I still think the Bears are probably going to get beat. But, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, all bets are off. But I think Aaron Rodgers will play, whether he practices this week or not. But it just seems strange to me that coming off the bye, he wouldn't practice all this week, unless what they're saying there is 2 full weeks of complete rest will heal that toe to get them ready for a playoff run. And unfortunately, Sean, I do think that's probably why he hasn't been working this week.
Yeah, I think they're just resting him up here, giving him as much time as possible because he's playing the team that he owns, so it'll be an easy week for him, right, Kyle?
Oh God, I'm tired of that storyline.
I'm tired of that storyline too. I hate myself for bringing that up.
The Sunday Night Football crew is going to beat that into the ground during the broadcast.
Hey, Kyle, can I do one shameless plug though?
Yeah.
Go to ShawLocal.com and read my column about Jimmy Graham, because the main focus of the column was about Jimmy Graham, the Bears nominee for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, very deserving nomination. But his comments about what Rodgers said were the best that I've heard, and I only used some of the quotes. But Jimmy Graham, Chicago Bear, former Green Bay Packer, almost was complimenting Rodgers for saying it. I wouldn't go that far, but I mean, it was a silly story. It's still a silly story. But seek out Jimmy Graham's comments in my column or elsewhere, because it really was good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, listen, anytime you want to make a plug for our content, I will not stop you.
All right. Well, then in that case, we will give our fearless predictions, which I never keep track of the records because I know that this is all coin flip stuff, but I think we're probably all doing pretty good in predicting the Bears. Unfortunately, they've become pretty predictable. And Kyle's mad at me because I didn't file mine before we did this. I'll get that to you shortly. But I know what it's going to be. Sean, I saw that you did make yours. Why don't you start us off?
I don't know. I have not made my picks. I got to do that as well. And you're right, Hub. I think we all have pretty good records. It's been fairly predictable this year, but I'm looking at these last 4 weeks, Vikings, Seahawks, Giants, Vikings, and wondering if that's about to change because I have no idea what's going to happen during those games. But as far as this week, I haven't thought of a score off the top of my head, but I do have the Packers winning by 10 points.
Kyle, at last I looked, which is really surprising with the Packers injuries, it was a huge number at 12.5. I think that's how kind of hapless the Bears were last week, against the Cardinals. So what do you see happening there?
I just don't see the offense being able to get back on track with Justin Fields coming back from the rib injury. I think it's probably going to be something about 30-13 Packers.
Here's what I could see happening. I could see the Bears rushing for 140, 170 yards. This offensive line, when they let them just pin their ears back and run block, and they've got 2 excellent running backs who both appear healthy in David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert, I think the Bears can threaten a team that way. They know that's got to be the best. And it's a good way to protect Justin Fields, by the way. Establish the run, slow down the pass rush. Which the Packers, they're not bad rushing the passer. They're not as good until they get Zadarius Smith back. I think that the defense, if it's healthier, which it appears it's going to be, is going to get after Aaron Rodgers. Do I think the Bears are going to win? No, I just don't see that happening. But the 12.5 points is interesting to me. I think that the Bears could be angry, feeling healthy. They could feel better. And so, maybe they keep this something like a 26-17 game or something like that to sneak under the 12.5. I don't think it's going to be the most entertaining Sunday night football game in history, and I don't give them much chance of pulling what would be a monumental upset. But, let's leave it on this, Sean. We don't have the access that we would like because of COVID, but not a complaint, just a reality. But to the extent that we do get to talk to these guys, every week, I think these players will play for Matt Nagy. They know what's at stake. He definitely has not lost his locker room. I don't know if the job is salvageable, but when you combine the Packer rivalry, the crap they've all taken in recent weeks, the way they feel about their coach, I do think there's a good chance that the Bears show up and don't embarrass themselves as they have on occasion when they've gotten in with some of these teams like Tampa and Cleveland.
Yeah, I could certainly see that being the case, and I'm with you. I don't think that they've given up on Matt Nagy either, and certainly I think the early part of the game is going to be key. If they can avoid getting into a big early hole, they're going to hang around in this game a little bit.
Anything to add, Kyle, or should we say goodbye?
Let's get out of here.
All right. I think it's time because we ran about 10 minutes over. So thank you all for staying with us. If you're still with us, you don't hear me, so you must still be with us. Again, anybody who wants to join the podcast live, get your questions in. We really enjoy taking them. We do it every Friday morning at 9:30. Go to @Kyle Nabors. Go to @Sean _Hammond, @Hub Arkush. All of us on Twitter. That'll get you right into the podcast through StreamYard. You can also get there through YouTube. You can download your subscriptions to our podcast. And I do believe, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, that they can watch the video version if they're not joining us live. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, because just looking at us for 54 minutes without a chance to participate isn't that exciting. But however you want to do it, we do want you part of the podcast. So thank you so much for being with us this week. We'll be back at you again next Friday morning at 9:30. And guys, if you're a Bears fan, let's hope for a Bears win. If you're a Packers fan, I know we have a lot of you. You can hope for your Packers. But I think we can all hope for at least a good football game. It's Sunday night football. We don't want to see anybody embarrass themselves out there. So we will hope for a highly competitive renewal of the NFL's best rivalry. Until then, we'll talk to you again next week.